The Australian dream of owning your own home is becoming increasingly unobtainable for those who refuse to become hugely in debt or save every penny for 40 years straight. This is why I've chosen to build my own home for a fraction of the cost. In this video series, I'll be assembling a steel frame kit home and installing the majority of the components on my own. The first stage of this project is getting a concrete pad organised. I called all of the local builders for a quote, but only one of the builders got back to me. The price isn't great, but I don't have much of a choice. I handed over my site plans detailing the dimensions of the slab, and a couple weeks later, a guy with a bobcat came out and dug away a layer of soil and replaced it with compacting sand. At the same time, I asked the bobcat guy to dig out my leach drains and septic tank holes. Once the sand pad was laid and compacted, I called all of the plumbers in the area for a quote to pre-lay my plumbing. I received 2 quotes and went with the company that responded first, as I didn't want to waste any more time. Unfortunately, I still had to wait 2 months for the plumber to catch up on their work before they could do mine, due to a shortage of tradespeople in Australia right now. With the plumbing done and the sand filled back over the pipe trenches, I called the building company again to lay the concrete. The builder and I had pegged and strung the slab, and a couple days later the concrete was laid. Unfortunately for me, it was around this time I realised that the council had decided to change the dimensions of my leach drains without informing me. My building approval paperwork states that the leach drains must be 2.8 metres wide, despite the same guy responsible for approving my building plans telling me that the leach drains ought to be 2.4 metres wide in an email not 2 months prior. This is quite frustrating and very lazy and unprofessional on the council's part. I then had to call out the bobcat guy yet again to widen my leach drains. This wasted nearly $1,000 of my very limited funds, so I asked the council to reimburse me for their mistake, but of course they refused. Anyway, once the slab was laid, I called the kit home supplier and ordered the steel frame of my home to be delivered. I unpacked the delivery, and with my neighbour's help, I started the assembly process. Being what is essentially a rectangular steel box, assembly was very straightforward. Lift off the walls and tech screw them together, ensuring that they fit straight and flush. There are 3 non-load bearing interior walls to install, and they are able to conveniently fit through the doorway. Upon inspection of the interior frame pieces, my neighbour and I realised that the kit home supplier had made an error. The bathroom door was in the wrong spot, roughly 30 centimetres too far to the right, along with a wall parallel to it. I then had to quickly jump on the phone with both the kit home supplier and the kit home manufacturer and explain what had gone wrong. We discovered that the plans given to me by the kit home supplier and then subsequently given to the concrete guys were slightly different to the plans given to the kit home manufacturer. Thankfully, this issue was quickly remedied by the kit home supplier, who sent me a replacement piece. What the supplier didn't tell me is that the new frame piece is split into 3 pieces to reduce transport costs, which I then had to assemble. This is a bit frustrating, as it should have been sent as a single piece like it was on the first time. An assembly required the persuasion of an angle grinder to remove some of the seized tech screws. With the new piece assembled, I employed the help of my friend to lift it into place and tech screw it in. With the frame completely assembled minus the roof trusses, I borrowed my neighbour's rotary hammer drill to drill holes into the concrete slab for fastening the frame to the ground. I used a 12mm masonry bit to drill roughly 28 holes into the slab for driving the 100mm self-tapping concrete bolts, ensuring each of the bent tabs had been fastened. 4 of the holes are home to chemically anchored threaded rods which supposedly have a higher uplift resistance. With that done, I started installing the 5 skillion roof trusses. I realised I'd have to drill a couple access holes. This meant removing one of the braces for access. Installing the trusses was a little bit tricky, as I had to hold the top end of the truss and bolt it in exactly the right spot while ensuring the bottom end of the truss doesn't slip off the wall and fall. What would have helped is if I'd used the right angle lintels supplied with the kit, designed to support the heavy weight of the top end while it's bolted in place. Oh well. After I'd done 2 of the trusses, I realised the heavy C-channel and frame lintel above the glass sliding door was installed the wrong way, and it would have to be flipped. I employed the help of my friend to do so. I disassembled the frame of the lintel into 2 pieces to reduce its weight, first removing the thick heavy C-channel and then the lower frame. As I was removing the C-channel, the ladder I was standing on collapsed. Luckily, I grabbed onto the lower frame of the lintel, saving me from falling, but the heavy C-channel I was holding smacked into my face, bending my back and causing me to fall anyway. Luckily, I was relatively uninjured apart from a sore back and some cuts and bruises. I took a quick break and got back to work, and employing 2 more friends to hold the ladder, I got the lower lintel down and flipped. I continued installing the roof trusses, and as I completed them, I cracked out the spirit level to ensure uniformity. I realised that all of the trusses were different heights, and one of the trusses had a severe bow on it which would have to be rectified. I called the kit home supplier again and informed them of the issue. At first I was told I'd have to completely disassemble the truss and bend it back into shape. This kit was supposed to bolt together from prefabricated parts, and I was not satisfied with the solution provided to me, so I insisted that the issue needed to be fixed by the kit home supplier. After a couple of days of back and forth communication, the kit home supplier agreed to send someone out to bend my truss back into the correct shape. The kit home supplier sent out a fellow called Gary who was able to unbolt the truss cross-bracing and use a long piece of wood to bend it back into shape, in situ. I mentioned earlier that all my trusses are different heights, so the kit home company suggested I use a spacer and liquid nails to bring them all up to the same height. I don't have much building experience, but I'm fairly certain it's not acceptable to have such variation in height. With that finally done, I can complete the framing by installing the ceiling and roof bracing, and lay the roof and ceiling battens. A very straightforward process. The roof battens are spaced by about 85 cm and the ceiling battens are spaced by about 60 cm. I then had to install a metal beam on both ends in order to support the ceiling bats. Since all of my roof trusses are different heights, and I packed them all up to the same height on the roof side, the ceiling side is now uneven, so although my roof battens are all relatively uniform in height variation, the ceiling battens have a discrepancy of about 10 mm. This is not the bolt-together kit home experience I was expecting.